My name is Matthew Collins, and for most of my adult life, I believed I was building everything the right way. I had a steady job, a boss I respected, and a wife I trusted with every piece of my heart. I was never the kind of man who chased after drama or excitement. I liked stability. I worked hard, came home on time, and thought that was enough to build a happy life. At least, that's what I told myself, until the day it all came crashing down with just 4 words from the man I thought was my mentor. It happened on a Tuesday, one of those ordinary mornings where nothing feels out of place. I got to the office, grabbed my coffee, and sat at my desk ready to tackle the day. But before I could even settle in, I got a message from the front desk. My boss, Richard Evans, wanted to see me in his office right away. I remember my stomach dropping a little, not because I thought I'd done anything wrong, but because it's never a good sign when the boss calls you in first thing in the morning. Still, I grabbed my notebook and walked in, expecting maybe a new project or even a performance review. Richard didn't waste time. He was leaning back in his chair, his face unusually stiff. "Matthew, I'm going to have to let you go," he said, his tone flat, almost rehearsed. I froze, staring at him, waiting for him to laugh or explain it was some kind of misunderstanding. Fired? Just like that? I had given years of my life to this company. I had worked late nights, skipped vacations, gone above and beyond. Yet here he was dismissing me like I was disposable. "I don't understand," I said slowly. "What did I do wrong? Was it a project? A client? You've never given me a bad review." He just sighed, avoiding eye contact. "It's nothing personal, Matthew. Just changes. You'll get your severance package. HR will take care of the details." Nothing personal. That's all he said, over and over, like those words could erase the fact that he had just ripped away my livelihood. It felt like someone had kicked the ground out from under me. I wanted answers, but he clearly wasn't going to give me any. I walked out of that office in a daze, my box of belongings in my hands, coworkers whispering as I passed by. By the time I reached my car, my throat was burning with the effort of holding back tears. My job wasn't just a paycheck. It was stability, security, and part of my identity. And in one cold, careless conversation, it was gone. When I got home, I thought my wife, Rachel, would be my anchor. I needed comfort, reassurance, maybe even just a hug to remind me that everything would be okay. But when I told her what had happened, her reaction wasn't what I expected. She wasn't shocked. She didn't get angry at the unfairness of it. Instead, she just stared at me for a moment, then said quietly, "Maybe it's for the best. Maybe you'll find something better." Her voice was calm, almost detached, as if she had already processed this news before I even said it. Something about that chilled me. At the time, I brushed it off as shock or maybe her trying to stay positive for my sake. But deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted. One I didn't yet understand. That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind kept repeating Richard's words, "It's nothing personal." But if it wasn't personal, then why did it feel like it was? Why did my wife seem so strangely unshaken? I didn't know it then, but this was just the beginning of a betrayal I couldn't have imagined in my worst nightmares. After losing my job, I thought the worst part would be financial pressure. Bills piling up, sleepless nights, worrying about how to support us, sending out resumes and hoping someone would give me a chance. But what I didn't expect, the thing that tore me apart, was realizing that unemployment wasn't the hardest hit to my life. It was the strange silence that started growing inside my own home, between me and the woman I had promised forever to. Rachel and I had been married for almost 8 years. In those years, we had faced challenges before, tight finances, family health scares, even a miscarriage that nearly broke us. But through it all, I always believed we were a team. If life knocked me down, Rachel was the one pulling me back up, reminding me why we were stronger together. At least, that's how it used to be. After Richard fired me, though, something shifted. At first, it was subtle. She seemed distracted. I'd be sitting at the kitchen table filling out job applications, and she'd be on her phone, smiling faintly, thumbs moving quickly across the screen. If I asked her what she was doing, she'd mutter, "Just texting a friend," and flip the phone over so I couldn't see. I told myself not to read into it. Everyone needs friends, and maybe she was just trying to keep her own spirits up while I was sinking deeper into frustration. But there was something about the way she guarded that phone, like it held a secret she didn't want me to touch. Then there were the nights. Rachel used to be someone who craved closeness. Movie nights on the couch, talking about our days until we fell asleep in each other's arms. But suddenly she was pulling away. "I'm tired," she'd say, rolling over before I even reached out. Or worse, she'd stay up long after I went to bed, the faint glow of her phone lighting up the living room. I'd wake up at 2 in the morning and hear her whispering into the phone in the kitchen, her voice low but urgent. When I asked her about it the next morning, she brushed it off. "Oh, that was just Amy. She's going through a breakup." But something about it didn't sit right. Her voice hadn't sounded like comfort. It sounded like excitement, like intimacy. Still, I told myself I was being paranoid. Losing my job had shaken me, and maybe I was just projecting my insecurities onto her. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe my wife was still the woman who had once held me on the bathroom floor after I got the call about my father's stroke, the woman who swore she'd never leave my side no matter what storms came. But then came the receipts. It was a Friday evening. Rachel had come home late, saying she'd gone out with a few friends after work. She smelled faintly of wine and expensive cologne, not the kind she wore, but the kind I remembered from somewhere else. She kissed me quickly on the cheek, set her purse on the counter, and went upstairs to shower. I don't know what compelled me. Maybe it was desperation, maybe it was that gnawing unease I'd been pushing down for weeks. But as soon as I heard the water running, I glanced at her purse. My hands trembled as I opened it, telling myself I was only looking because I needed peace of mind. Inside, tucked between her wallet and a packet of gum, was a folded stack of receipts. I pulled them out and unfolded the first one. It was from a steakhouse downtown, dated just 2 nights earlier. 2 entrees, a bottle of wine, $146.50. My chest tightened. Rachel had told me she'd worked late that night. She hadn't mentioned dinner out. I looked at the next receipt. Italian restaurant, 2 cocktails, pasta, dessert, $92. Another one, a rooftop bar I knew well because it was just 3 blocks from my old office, 2 glasses of expensive scotch. But it wasn't just the places or the money that hit me. It was the timing. All those late nights, all those friends she'd been meeting, all those moments she brushed me off when I asked for connection. She wasn't just hanging out with girlfriends. She was out with someone. My hand shook as I shoved the receipts back into her purse. By the time Rachel came downstairs, hair damp, wearing one of my old t-shirts, I was sitting on the couch staring blankly at the TV. She asked me what I wanted for dinner. My throat tightened so badly I couldn't answer. I just nodded, and she went into the kitchen, humming softly like nothing in the world was wrong. That night, I barely slept. My mind spun in circles, replaying every detail, the sudden detachment, the secretive texts, the faint scent of cologne, the receipts. The evidence was piling up, but I didn't know who. Who was she meeting? Who had taken my place at those dinners, at those late-night conversations, in those moments of laughter I hadn't shared with her in weeks? But the answer came sooner than I expected. The following Monday, I was driving to the unemployment office to drop off paperwork. On the way, I passed by the rooftop bar from one of the receipts. My stomach clenched as I glanced up at the patio, and that's when I saw her. Rachel, my wife, sitting at a table with a man whose profile I knew all too well. Richard Evans. My boss. It hit me like a freight train. Richard, the man who told me it was nothing personal, who fired me without a shred of explanation. He wasn't just cutting costs. He wasn't just downsizing. He had taken my job. And now he was taking my wife. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. From where I sat at the red light, I watched Rachel lean in across the table, laughing at something Richard said. His hand slid across the table, brushing hers, and she didn't pull away. My chest felt like it was caving in, my entire body trembling with rage and disbelief. In that single moment, everything made sense. Why my firing felt so personal, why Rachel had been so calm when I told her the news, why her nights had suddenly been filled with friends and her purse filled with receipts from restaurants near my office. She wasn't just hanging out with girlfriends. She was out with Richard. And the worst part? Rachel had let him. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was quiet, but my mind was loud. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured Brian, my boss, sitting across from my wife in a dimly lit restaurant. I imagined his smug smile, the same one he wore when he told me it's nothing personal while firing me. Only now, that smile wasn't about business. It was about my family, about my wife. And the thought of him moving into my life like some kind of replacement was eating me alive. The next morning, I decided to test things. I casually mentioned to Sarah that I wanted to take her out to dinner, something nice to cheer us both up, since I was still adjusting to unemployment. She hesitated for just a second, barely noticeable, but I caught it. Then she quickly said, "Oh, tonight's not good. I promised my mom I'd stop by." I nodded, pretending to accept her excuse, but my stomach dropped. Her mom lived 2 hours away, and she hadn't mentioned this visit before. It was the same kind of vague excuse I used to give when I didn't want my boss to know I was taking an early afternoon off. Later that evening, while she claimed to be at her mom's, I sat in my car a block away from one of the restaurants where I'd found her receipt. I didn't know if she'd actually show up, but something in my gut told me to wait. 2 hours passed, and I was about to give up when I finally saw her car pull into the lot. My heart started racing. I hunched down in my seat, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly they hurt. And then I saw him. Brian, my former boss, stepping out of his car, looking way too comfortable, way too familiar. He was dressed in the same casual jacket I'd seen him wear at company happy hours, the one Sarah once said actually looked pretty stylish. They greeted each other like it was the most normal thing in the world, not a handshake, not a polite hello, but an embrace, a long one. Too long for just friends. I froze. My body went numb, but my heart pounded like it was trying to break out of my chest. I wanted to storm out, scream, confront them right there in the parking lot. But I couldn't move. Instead, I sat and watched as they walked inside together, side by side, smiling, laughing. The soundless vision of them walking into that restaurant felt like a knife in my back, one she twisted deeper with every step. I didn't follow them in. I knew if I did, I'd lose control. I needed proof, not just emotions. So I waited. They were inside for nearly 2 hours. When they finally came back out, I saw Sarah holding Brian's arm like it belonged to her. She looked happy, genuinely happy, in a way she hadn't looked with me in months. That image burned into my memory, and I swear it was the longest drive home of my life. When Sarah got back later that night, she acted like nothing happened. She kissed me on the cheek, asked me if I'd eaten, then casually told me her mom was doing okay. She lied right to my face without even flinching. I nodded and played along, even though my blood was boiling inside. The next few days, I dug deeper. I started checking her phone whenever she left it unattended. She had started guarding it more, setting it face down, keeping it in her pocket even at home. But one morning, while she was in the shower, I finally got my chance. There were no obvious messages from Brian. They were smarter than that. But I noticed something strange. She had downloaded a new messaging app I'd never seen her use before, one that was password protected. That's when I knew it was worse than I thought. They weren't just casually seeing each other, they were hiding it, planning it. And I couldn't help but wonder, was Brian the reason I'd been fired? Had he cut me out of the company not because of budget cuts, but because he was in the way of what he wanted most? My wife? The paranoia ate at me. I started rethinking everything. The late nights Sarah claimed she was working, the sudden increase in her visits to her mom, the way she seemed distant whenever I tried to talk about rebuilding after losing my job. It was all starting to add up, and the pieces formed a picture I didn't want to see. One Friday night, I decided to set a trap. I told Sarah I had an old coworker who wanted to meet for drinks, so I wouldn't be home until late. She smiled a little too brightly and said, "Oh, that's great, you should go." I could almost see the relief in her eyes, like she was happy to have the house to herself. But I didn't actually leave. I parked a few houses down, hidden by the shadows, and waited. An hour later, headlights pulled into my driveway. My stomach dropped again. I squinted, and sure enough, it was Brian's car. My former boss, the man who'd taken my job and now, clearly, was trying to take more. He walked up to my front door like he belonged there. My wife greeted him with a smile that wasn't just friendly, it was intimate. She let him inside, and the door closed behind them. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel again, my knuckles white, fighting back the urge to run up and bang on the door. But I didn't. I stayed there, heart racing, watching my own house betray me from the outside. I couldn't believe it. The betrayal wasn't just happening out in the world anymore. It was happening in my home, the space I thought was safe. That night, as I sat there in silence, one thing became clear. Brian hadn't just fired me. He had erased me. From my job, from my daily routine, and now, from my own marriage. He wanted me gone, completely. And slowly, painfully, it felt like Sarah was letting him succeed. I knew I couldn't just sit back and watch anymore, but I also knew I couldn't just burst in without proof. If I confronted her, she'd deny it. If I confronted him, he'd smirk and say I was paranoid. No, I needed something undeniable, something solid. And the thought of setting up my own cameras right there in my house began to feel like the only way forward. But even as I started planning, one question kept echoing in my head, haunting me like a shadow. Did she ever really love me? Or had she been waiting all along for someone like him to come along and take my place? And worse, was I already too late to stop it?
I wish I could tell you that the truth came out gently, that maybe my wife sat me down one evening, her eyes filled with guilt, and confessed everything before I had to dig any deeper. But no, the truth came crashing down on me in the ugliest way possible, leaving scars I don't think will ever heal. After that explosive confrontation in the driveway, when I finally admitted that I knew something was going on between her and my boss, I thought she'd at least deny it a little longer. I thought she'd try to spin it, or cry, or say I was imagining things. Instead, she just looked at me with this cold, flat expression that I'll never forget. And then she whispered the words that shattered what little was left of my heart. she said. "I never meant for you to find out this way. But it's true. I love him." Imagine hearing those words from the person you've built your entire life around. My knees literally buckled. I had to sit down on the curb because I couldn't breathe. My own wife, the woman I thought was my best friend, was telling me straight to my face that she loved another man. And not just any man, but the one who had destroyed my career, my livelihood, and my pride. I asked her why. Why him? Why my boss? Out of every man in the world, why would she choose the one person who had the most power to hurt me? And her answer was like salt in an open wound. She said, "Because he makes me feel alive, something I haven't felt with you in years. You stopped seeing me. You stopped trying." Those words cut me deeper than any knife. Was she right? Had I been so focused on work, so exhausted from trying to provide that I forgot to notice her? Had I somehow pushed her into his arms without realizing it? My mind was spinning with guilt and shame, but at the same time, another voice inside me screamed, "No, this isn't on you. She made this choice." But the more I pressed, the more the horrifying truth came out. This wasn't some quick fling. This wasn't a moment of weakness. No, this had been going on for months, almost a year. She admitted that the nights she claimed to be out with friends, the times she said she was too tired to go out with me, the afternoons when she came home smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine, all of it had been him, my boss. And then the final blow. She told me the real reason I'd been fired. She said he didn't just lay me off because the company was downsizing. He did it because it was getting complicated, because he wanted me out of the way. He wanted her all to himself, and the easiest way to make that happen was to remove me completely from work, from her daily life, from everything. Do you know what it feels like to realize that two people you trusted conspired behind your back to dismantle your entire life? It's like standing in the middle of an earthquake, watching the ground split apart beneath your feet, knowing there's no way to stop it. I couldn't even look at her anymore. I went inside, grabbed a bag, and packed whatever I could carry. She didn't try to stop me. She just stood there, arms crossed, almost relieved that it was finally all out in the open. I remember walking out the door thinking, this isn't my home anymore. This isn't my wife anymore. This isn't my life anymore. The weeks that followed were some of the darkest I've ever lived through. I crashed on a buddy's couch. I barely ate. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together, laughing, touching, living the life that I was supposed to be living. And the worst part, I was broke. I had no job, no money, and nowhere else to go. My savings drained fast, and with my wife cutting me off completely, I felt like I was drowning. But then something inside me shifted. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was survival. Maybe it was the realization that if I let them destroy me completely, then they'd win, and I couldn't give them that. So I started picking myself back up, one piece at a time. I applied for every job I could find. I reached out to old contacts. I swallowed my pride and asked for help when I needed it. Slowly but surely, I found my footing again. But here's where things get interesting. Karma, as they say, has a funny way of catching up. One night, about 6 months after I left, I got a call from a former coworker. He said, "Man, you're not going to believe this. Your old boss, he's a wreck. The company's tanking. And guess what? People are saying he and your wife aren't even together anymore." I'll admit, hearing that gave me a twisted sense of satisfaction. After everything they put me through, the thought that their love didn't even last a year was almost poetic. I didn't know the details yet, but later I learned that my boss had promised her the world only to crumble under the pressure. His career fell apart after I left because it turned out I was the one holding most of the pieces together. Without me, he couldn't keep the company afloat. Investors pulled out, employees quit, and soon he wasn't the powerful man she thought he was. He was just another failure. And as for my wife, or rather my ex-wife, she tried reaching out to me eventually. She sent me messages, left voicemails, even showed up once at the apartment I was renting. She said she was sorry. She said she made a mistake. She said she missed me. And you know what? A part of me still loved her. A part of me wanted to believe that maybe we could fix things, that maybe we could start over. But then I remembered the look on her face when she told me she loved him. I remember packing my bag while she stood there, silent, almost smug. I remember the months of lies, the dinners where she smiled across the table at me while secretly planning her next night with him. So I told her no. I told her she made her choice, and now she had to live with it. I won't lie to you. It wasn't easy. Saying no to someone you've loved for so long feels like ripping your own heart out. But sometimes the only way to save yourself is to let go completely. Today, I'm not the same man I was before all of this happened. I'm stronger. I'm sharper. I know now that not everyone who smiles at you is your friend. I know that betrayal can come from the places you least expect it. And I know that no matter how much someone hurts you, you have the power to rebuild. And as for my ex-boss, last I heard he's unemployed, broke, and bitter. And honestly, that's exactly where he deserves to be. So what's the lesson here? Maybe it's that betrayal doesn't define you. Maybe it's that even when the people closest to you stab you in the back, you still have the choice to stand tall and move forward. Or maybe it's simply this. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find out how strong you really are. And if you're listening to my story right now and you're going through something similar, maybe your partner cheated, maybe someone at work stabbed you in the back, maybe life knocked you down so hard you don't know how to get up again. Just remember, you're not broken. You're not finished. You're still here. And as long as you're still here, you've got a chance to write a better ending for yourself. Because in the end, their betrayal wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a new one.